Good morning. We are going to continue with the program that we have for today. The panel that we will have for the session is entitled Land Management. And we have two speakers, as we have been doing in this conference. And in this case, we have Belén Navarro Heras. She's the Director of Cadastre and the Ministry of the Treasury in Spain. And Manuel Ignacio Acosta, Director of the National Land Registry for the Territorial and Urban Ministry in Mexico. Thank you for being here and sharing your presentations with us. Belén Navarro, she has a degree in Economic and Entrepreneurial Science at the Universidad Complutense de Madrid, and she has a law degree in the National Law School in Spain. In 2012, she was appointed as the Director of Cadastre by the Ministry of the Treasury and Public Administration, and she should maintain and create the cadastre and all the information that is contained in it. She's a co-author of a book called Haciendas Locales and another book about tax matters. She has been the Vice President of the National Council, the Superior Geographic Council, and the President of the Real Estate Coordination, Technical Cooperation of Cadastre, and a member of the Real Estate Coordination and in the Cadastre General Division, and she works also in the Spirit working groups that manages geospatial data for Europe and other groups, also being a member of the EFIC in the Cadastre Division. Without further ado, I will give you the floor, Ms. Navarro. Good morning. First of all, I would like to thank the National Geography and Statistics Institute in Mexico for the invitation that they made to the General Division of Cadastre to attend to this conference, not only as a speaker, as a participant, but also as a speaker, and having the opportunity to explain and present to all of you what we do in our cadastre in Spain and what we're currently doing, the projects we have, and our current plans. Yesterday during dinner, one of the attendants said that information is not a goal, but it's a mean. And I was thinking about this idea because geographic, cadastral, and geospatial centers have the purpose of providing a public service to serve our societies. For our general division, the main purpose is to provide the municipalities and cities with information in order to collect the appropriate taxes, the property taxes in each case, and for that purpose we should have complete, accurate information, as complete as possible, including all the properties that are present in our municipalities, all lands or lots or buildings and their possible alterations. And on the other hand, apart from being complete, it should be accurate and properly valued. Luis Alejon, my colleague, is here with us, and he yesterday gave a lecture explaining what's the trend of this property valuation in Spain. And today I need to explain what's the strategic project that we have in Spain to make sure that the real estate cadastre includes and gathers all the properties, all the lands, all the buildings, with the corresponding acceleration in order to give municipalities the most accurate and updated census and to have more efficient collection of the property tax and to achieve greater fundings and for them to achieve their purposes. If you were in yesterday's presentation, this was presented, but well, I will give a small introduction to this. Real estate cadastre is a national registry that includes two territories, the País Vasco and Navarra, that considering their traditional regime, they are divided in that situation. It includes all the real estate, including plots, lands, and any constructions. And it is also a mandatory registry. I mean, it's mandatory for all owners of real estate or anyone who has a deed of property for any reasons that they have this acquisition or tenure to communicate the cadastre that they own those pieces of land, those buildings, and to communicate any changes that they may have in those pieces of land, if they have new construction and extension to a current building, if there's any changes of owners, they should also declare that. And we currently have all this territory divided in the Basque Country and Navarra gathered in the cadastral registry with the appropriate continuity. And as my colleague said, in the website you can see the cadastral with a graphic representation of all the lots, the pieces of land, and any municipal information of 7,594 municipalities, almost 37 million properties, 40 million rustic plots, and another group composed by other special buildings. And these are properties that are specialized groups like airports, commercial centers, electrical centers, dams, and other kinds of properties. So we gather physical, legal characteristics, location, the cadastral reference, which is a kind of property, and this reference should include any act or business should be registered before a notary public, and it should include also a power service contract. So it is now a mandatory requirement to include that information in the cadastral reference information. The use or destination, if it's housing, if it's for endorser uses, its offices, if it's a rustic piece of land, well, the kind of planting activities or agricultural activities dedicated to them, cadastral value, the quality of the construction, the cadastral value, as I mentioned, and the cadastral title. As I mentioned, this information is available to anyone from their computer. The value and the owner, those are two details that can only be seen by by owners. So we need to provide information, as I said, to municipalities for tax collection purposes. Annually, this general division sends information with a list indicating of the lands of the buildings with their cadastral value and the owner, so that the municipality just has to take that list with those values, multiply times the type of or tax rate that is fixed by the municipalities, that goes from 0.4 to 0.1%, and send it for collection. The average is 0.47%. That we're in that range. So what is the property tax in figures to see the importance in Spain? It's 1.13 of the GDP in our country, 20% of municipal income. And if we talk about this municipal income, the tax income represents 60%. It's important to say that this is a tax that has a long tradition, that has general acceptance, of course, except for their increases, and it has a 90% collection rate. So this is quite sensitive information, and it's very important to have it updated, especially because it is an important source of funding for municipalities. But there is another element that we need to add. Cadastre, the Spanish cadastre that is regulated by law, says that is governed by the principles of generality and the equal distribution of the properties, and the fair thing to do is to collect or to charge to taxpayers depending on what they own. So we want to describe the reality in legal terms. And we need to see what information is included in the urban cadastre. We have this orthophotograph that represents the cadastral cartography. We could choose a little block. This is what we can see from the headquarters of the cadastre. We see the orthophotograph, which represents the graphic representation, and we can look closer, and we can go story by story, and in each case we attach also the picture, location, surface, square meters, the use, construction quality, and years of existence. In the last 5 years, we've included 2,300,000 enrollments. What does this enrollment mean? For example, if it used to be a rustic land and then becomes rural, urban, there's a new construction, the owner should declare this information, and this is enrolled. First, we have these declarations. We say it's a mandatory registry, and all owners in Spain should, by law, otherwise they will be punished, to communicate before this real estate cadastre that they're the owner of this property, that they have to do any changes or extensions, that they have new constructions. And with this, we have another channel of information, which is communications. Communications, especially coming from notaries and those public attesters that for more than 10 years are obliged to do this communications every month. All notaries in Spain will send a list that is called an index, including all the transactions, sales of real estate, and when they are done for 100% of the ownership, this makes the owner exempt from the obligation of doing the declaration, because it will be communicated by the notary. And then when we don't have information coming from the first two channels, we have inspection and regularization. And this is what I'm going to describe from this moment on. Spanish law gives the cadastre the power to request to any entity any information that could be useful for tax purposes. That means that we can go to any public or private entity to ask for any data that may be relevant for cadastre purposes, and they by law are obliged to answer to our request. They cannot say that it is confidential information. They should at all times collaborate in providing us with the information we request. For regularization and inspection, and to cover everything that is not covered by communications and declarations. And when we have not received a voluntary declaration, we have some detection techniques and to create incidence maps. And for more than 4 years, we have been working in putting in the Spanish map a location or locating or identifying all alterations that we had not seen before. If we have a piece of land or the registration of a piece of land and we have an important building there and we have an impact on the property tax that should be paid for it, we have this detection methods. I think we all know about them because we have been talking about them, and the map that we have created. If you see, we have inspection and regularization, we have staff dedicated to that. I'm not saying anything new. If I tell you that the economic crisis that Spain has been going through for more than 4 years, of course, one of the things that we have seen is a reduction in the positions and a lot of retired employees. So we have fewer opportunities to use our own means for inspection. So we need to think about the best projects and ideas in order to address these problems due to these deficiencies. So non-declared alterations that are an important impact in cadastre are one, new constructions, refurbishment, or a complete reform. These are undeclared alterations that cadastre should incorporate. We call them incidences. And once we have these categories described, what we do is with our detection techniques, we use orthophotos and LiDAR. And with all of this information, with as well as aerial pictures and other techniques that have been described. In Spain, we have flights every 3 years to cover all the Spanish territory, and those flights created by the National Geography Institute is funded from the autonomous communities, and that information is used for many purposes. And in the cadastre, we're using it to detect these incidents as I have described. This is an example of how we we compare the cadastral map and how we have the representation of this plots. We mark where we see the differences. And we also use the LiDAR because it allows us to know those cases in which even though there was a previous construction, we're not able through an air picture to see if there have been any changes, for example, adding a new story or having any new elevations to the construction. This is something that LiDAR allows us because it gives us the height and the volumes. So this is an example of the use that we are doing of the LiDAR, and which has been facilitated to us by the National Geography Institute in Spain. We have marked all the construction that are, it's not only those that are undeclared, but all that we have seen. This is information, unclassified information we get from LiDAR, and we assign, in this case, red for the buildings. And if we see it in this 3D picture, we see the constructions that we had, and we compare it to the cadastral map to see if we have already them reflected with the same height, or if there have been any changes. And we can see some images in yellow. Those would be buildings detected by LiDAR with when compared to the cadastral map. We can see the comparison with the picture, and it, of course, corresponds to the property that we had registered before. We have seen throughout the territory, except for the Basque Country and Navarra, we have seen that that between 3 and 10% may have one omission or one incidence. So what do? we have a complete map. We have these incidents marked there, and we know with the pictures and the LiDAR where they are located. And now we have to incorporate it to the cadastre with the different means that we have. Last year, there was a rule, a law that was passed for a 4-year project that allows us to cover all the national procedure with a more speedy technique to gather all the information, to incorporate all the works that we have been conducting. And those omissions that we focus are urban and rustic, these 4 categories that we have said. New construction, extensions, reforms, and rehabilitations. And if there is no money, how do we fund them? Well, we see that, or make sure that those who have not paid pay. So we will provide a service to the owner of the property, and we gather the characteristics and incorporate to the cadastre. It's of course a rate, it's a tax, because having a service that has not been provided by the owner does not eliminate the fact that it is provided. So having this regularization costs 60 euros. And what is the net cost for the state? 0. And the other question is, well, out of those 60 euros, well, do you collect them with small amounts? And it is a fact that taxpayers since pay, or tax authorities will make sure that this is collected. And if it is not paid in the voluntary period, they will have the appropriate punishment. They have different means to do that, to make sure that this is collected within the appropriate period. So we need to increase the taxes that are collected in each municipality. So we have been defining the different procedures, applications, computer applications, the election of the companies that we have chosen for field purposes. And last week we had a resolution published indicated 176 first municipalities in Spain that are going to be regularized. That means that we have a brand new procedure as of last week. And finally, I would like to give you an example. We have this cadastral map, and we see that there's no construction reflected in this plot. So they would only pay for the use of land. Let's see with the air picture what happens, what we see. We see that there is a house, a very big house that has not been declared. And what do we need to do? We'll incorporate to the cadastre to get this. The cadastral value of the land would be lower, and it would pay 132 euros. It would be 22,000 euros, the total value. But then we see that the actual value with the house built in it, it's 88,000 euros. So they will have to pay a property tax of 528 euros per year. And the year in which they are regularized, the municipality may collect all due taxes for those unprescribed periods that in space 4 years. And now, in these 176 municipalities, we have created the incidence map. We have asked that any declarations by owners have been incorporated to the cadastre, that there's nothing pending, to clear unknown titles. In some cases, we don't have specific information about the owners, and those, when we need to incorporate them to this government information, well, we need to detail the owner's information, and we have a database that we update every year, and to make sure we have a tax information up to date. It's important to have the location of the property and the owner to make sure that they pay the taxes, and we incorporate rural constructions that may be barns and other type of constructions that are used in rural areas. Now we started with this regularization in 176 municipalities. We have to do a field survey, some pictures of the facades, and go to the municipality to get all the construction permits or licenses, and we'll have the appropriate on-site measurements. And to make this procedure fast, we didn't want to make it too bureaucratic, but we wanted to make sure that we were ensuring all the legal aspects for the owners. So instead of sending a series of notices, we are thinking about designing, or we thought about designing a procedure that would include at the same time a notification of the beginning and the end of the procedure. So we send a letter to the owner saying, okay, you used to have a land in the cadastre, registered in the cadastre, and we have realized that you have a house built in it, and we have measured it. We have the blueprints with have the plans and the pictures, and we need to have a change in the cadastre, and you need to have a modification to 88,000 euros. You have 15 days to respond, and if you don't respond, this is finalized. And at the same time, we send a letter saying, okay, please be so kind to go to the cashier and pay the appropriate tax. At that moment, we don't tell the specifics about the amount that they need to pay, because remember that the cadastre belongs to the government, and who is in charge to collect that is the municipalities, because it's a municipal funding. But once that the cadastre has sent the letter to the owner, and that he has been communicated that the cadastral value is not 22,000 but 88,000, the next step is to go to the municipality, and the municipality has to say, okay, you need to pay all due taxes, and as of next year you will pay the appropriate fee that is not 133 but 528 euros. So without anything else to add, I will conclude my presentation by saying that this has been productive in Spain. Municipalities have had a positive response, and we hope that we can contribute to a greater tax collection in Spain. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. And now we'll have the presentation of Ignacio Acosta Gutiérrez, who is the current director of the Mexico's National Agrarian Registry. He has a degree from the University of Hermosillo, and he has pursued postgraduate studies in the philosophy of the law and communications and history, and he's he has participated at both the municipal, state, and federal level in various government departments, including being a local deputy for the state of Hermosillo and a federal representation for the same state. And he was a mayoral candidate for one of the municipalities in the state of Sonora. So I give him the floor. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, thank you very much. We just heard a splendid talk regarding what's happened in Spain. Thank you very much for telling us about it. That's such an important success story. I'd like to thank the INEGI and all of the organizers of this event for the opportunity, and to talk a little bit about the context of Mexico. Thank you very much to the Vice President Rolando Campo and other INEGI guests who are here. So in Mexico, something important has been going on. From 1915 to 1992, we have the agrarian distribution. And in order to understand where we're going and what's happening, we need to see what this entailed, why it was done, for what reasons, and today what is the territorial policy that has been defined by President Peña Nieto, and there's just one ministry that oversees this topic. The important thing here is to understand that the agrarian reform, or rather it's important to understand the agrarian reform and also the urban and territorial reform that is taking place. In 1915, the idea was to equitably distribute the land and to talk about the country or the territory. If we go back to the oldest times or of our earliest times of our country, the land has and its equitable distribution has always been a factor or present. So the idea of trying to properly administer property in Mexico was based on having a socially equitable distribution. And I think that the lack of progress in some of this has come in different phases. The country has been divided into social or communal property, but also private property. And then there's another, what we call the small landholder. So there are a lot of different treatments of how we treat the territory or how we divide it up. And so there are registries that are created, and then more registries and even more registry, the public registry, the social registry, social property registry. We have very many registries in this country. So where we're heading is that President Peña Nieto has created the SEDATU, the ministry called SEDATU, and it encompasses territorial, urban, agrarian development and everything that this implies. In this respect, the National Agrarian Registry, what it's trying to do is to head towards that new development, that new evolution that the law has created the SEDATU for, and we had to really get rid of undeclared and lags that we had a backlog of 236,000 formalities or procedures plus 540,000 that have been registered this year. The Agrarian Register is the largest in Mexico as far as social property is concerned, and it also has the broadest historical archives. In this respect, at the SEDATU, we concentrate the regulatory agency for urban properties and the modernization of cadasters and public registries that I have Mr. Guevara here who takes care of that. Also, agrarian development is concentrated there, and all of the areas of the agrarian, that has to do with the agrarian property, including the deputy ministry. Also, the programs that support the municipalities, which is habitat and public spaces. So the thing first is to look at the country as a single territory, not just as a dispersion of small differentiations. This has created a disorder that we're trying to see now to try to unify it and treat it differently so that we can turn the territory into a leverage for development, and that there stop being so much migration, because really the countryside and the agricultural sector is going through one of the worst crises it has ever experienced. So social property today in Mexico are heading towards private property which in principle in 1992, when the end of the agrarian distribution, we came up with the idea of what's called absolute title. And the idea was that agricultural workers could have access to financing, and the ejidatarios, who are communal landholders, that they would also have access to this financing. But this hasn't turned out to be what it was intended for. So the idea is, how do we take agrarian development and how can cities grow in an orderly fashion, and how is it that we have to grow? Because today, the the more than 59 metropolitan areas and the 100 intermediate cities are surrounded by ejidos, these communal land holdings. And what happens is that these cities grow outward into these social properties, and they have done so in a very disorderly fashion. So when social property becomes private property, we no longer follow it up. We sort of lose track of it. So we're working on this, and it's very clear that the 21st century agrarian reform has to evolve towards a single territorial policy with certainty under the law, and where there is only one information system, and that's where we're headed. To be able to really deal with the backlog and the disorder in small and medium-sized cities and the chaos in the metropolitan areas, we have to be very clear that we need a territorial information system that brings together all of the areas where the public registry and the cadasters have the follow-through or follow through these properties. They have the background and the follow-up that they require, and also the land uses and everything this implies, always complying with environmental laws. Let me give you an example. Last week we had over 4 meetings to see the issue of the background in the state of Guerrero and other states in terms of property, to see what happened that in such and such an area development was built, was constructed. We see that we only had a very recent background information when it was entered into the public registry. And what we see is that it was a presidential adjudication of 1944, and then in part of that ejido there was an expropriation, and then after that, a part of that ejido became of full property, and then in 2001 it became, the entire ejido became full property. But we were the only ones who had that history. That's why it's so important to have one single information system that will provide more security and make it more clear as far as land uses and how the things are treated and what the land is used for. Well, obviously for us, we need for that. We need to really clarify the whole issue of the agrarian distribution, and the processes or procedures need to be much more agile and quickly. Today, the ministry, the SEDATU, concentrates 5 of those data banks. One is the National Agrarian Registry, and the idea is to start with us and then link us up with the states and the municipalities, but also with the other areas of the federation that have information, such as the sole housing registry. So it's very clear, President Peña Nieto's vision is very clear, and that's to maximize the territory and give it the assurances not just per parcel, but to the entire territory. It's the same territory, but treated differently. In this respect, we have 2 programs this year that are mainly aimed at getting us up to date as far as the agrarian registry is concerned. We have FANAR, which is a program that has been around for quite a while, and then one that is zero backlog and the reordering or remanagement of the land. But obviously we have to be connected to the municipalities and the states and tell them what we're doing. The challenges that we're meeting and where we're heading is to have that sole information system, but also to work very much on what the land is used for. We have to have, it's very clear that in this data bank, we don't know what are the national territories, which are the ones that are empty lots, which are, what do we need for public infrastructure, or different issues either, or purposes either for at the federal or municipal level. For this, we also have to be heading toward a national cadastre. And what they have in Spain, frankly, is very, very, very important. Spain's experience, where they have everything in a single information system, in a national cadastre, and a registry that is very well kept and well ordered. And that's what we have to do. We have to legally adjust our agrarian law so that we can have also those agreements with states and municipalities, so that we know what the land uses are, both in the rural and in the urban areas, and what happens with properties that become private property. So we have this special regularization program, and what we're doing is adapting everything so that it's legally compliant, and also have a national inventory that includes all sorts of property: social property, private property, communal property, where we have the small landholders, private national land, the maritime zone, so that it's very clear to us which of the all of the areas that make up the national territory. We cannot continue to transferring title of public property if we don't know what's going to be happening to them. So that's why it's important to have the information in a single system, so that it can be used for making decisions. And lastly, we have the territorial information system, and there the idea is to share all of the information that we have. The idea is to head in that direction and to demystify that the idea that the agrarian issue is not compatible with private property or urban development. We have to continue to defend and create incentives for those who are marginalized and have the least. But the territorial policy does not clash with this premise. On the contrary, it would order it, it would give it planning, and it would provide a real boost to what is each of the 30,000 or over 30,000 agrarian plots. So the agrarian registry, what it's trying to do, has created an initial platform according to President Peña Nieto's vision. It's clear to us that people, from the developer to the government to the agrarian individual, each one needs to know this information. And as I said at the beginning, I also agree, there's no point in having a huge archive or having a lot of information if it's not shared, if it's not made known to the majority, and if we don't find the use for this information. So that's why we have to start sharing this information with a series, with a platform that's much more user-friendly, so that people can access it from home and from their computer, and they can access all of the historical information. But it's also clear to us that the issue of that cities cannot continue to be kidnapped by speculation. In this respect, that the information serves for decision-making, and if we plan cities and we plan public works, then we'll know where we're headed. And this is very important, because today in Mexico, we have one of the worst problems in terms of urban planning and growth. And this is originated by the lack of planning of the territorial development and what is the growth of cities. And in the last 20 years, cities have grown exponentially, and they've gone from 20 years ago, today, they've gone from 40 million people in rural areas. Now there are only 25 million people in rural areas. So we really see a transformation of the cities that have grown in a very disorderly manner. And what is all of this for? Well, it would serve not just to grow in an orderly fashion and to generate fewer costs to the municipalities and the states. It would also serve in terms of security, economic growth, both in rural areas and the cities, and also tax collection and public safety, which today, because of the disorder and the lack of information, this is taken advantage of by groups by criminal groups who are dedicated to other sorts of activities. So this is where we're going now at the end of 2013 and at the beginning of 2014. Thank you. Okay, so time is a bit short, so I think we're not going to have time for questions and answers. And I have here a dozen questions, and I've talked with our presenters, and I think what we can do is, if you wouldn't mind answering them privately, person to person, when the panel is finished. So I have nothing left but to thank you for your participation and thank our presenters. And if you'll allow me to give them a token of recognition from the organizing committee.